Welcome to the Legacy Project, a podcast that really focuses on the history that has shaped and influenced our guests, and that creates a wide interest in the part of our audience. And we're very fortunate today to have Craig Keene. Craig, I identify you as a retired professor, but I don't know if that's accurate. Is that a title you prefer?
Well, I've never really understood how I'm to be situated in terms of titles. So I was a university professor for, I think, 38 years, and I am now legally retired. So I suppose that's accurate, at least. Whether it's an apt description of me, I don't know. I'm not quite sure what retirement signifies in my case. But it's not like I'm busy. I mean, I live a very unbusy life, actually.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. Your discipline was philosophical theology. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, I would probably say systematic theology.
Okay.
But it's a very odd systematic theology. I mean, it's a non-linear systematic theology. But my PhD is in philosophy of religion and theology. So I've certainly dabbled in philosophy a great deal.
Yeah.
So philosophical theology is not too far off the mark.
Okay. In full transparency, I have known Craig for at least 50 years. We were in seminary together and some graduate school, and our paths have crossed periodically ever since then. And I think you may have been a year behind me. I think I graduated in 74.
I think that's right. I graduated in 75.
Yeah. So we're really fortunate to have you as one of our guests, Craig.
Thank you.
So let me start off basically. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in Oklahoma City, St. Anthony's Hospital, and spent just under the first 8 years of my life in Oklahoma City. I'm the child of two Oklahomans. My mother was an urban Oklahoman, born and raised in Oklahoma City. My father was born and raised in rural Oklahoma, in eastern Oklahoma, in Walika predominantly. But I mean, I've always been very conscious of the fact that I'm an Okie. My parents were just Okie to the marrow of their bones. And even though we moved from there when I was not quite 8 years old, I was very conscious of the fact that Oklahoma was home. And we would be homeless until we returned to Oklahoma.
I was in Oklahoma last week for a couple of days, and I was in western Oklahoma, in Canute, Oklahoma, and then I had lunch in Corn, Oklahoma.
Ah, very good.
And
there's also a Sweetwater in that part of the state.
That's true.
One of my favorite names for a town.
Yeah, that is true. Done a lot of work in different projects in Oklahoma. So you moved from Oklahoma when you were 8?
Yeah, we moved to Chicago, of all things.
Oh, really?
My father had a career opportunity, so he took us to Chicago. He was sort of a one-man band of fueling and other kinds of maintenance work on the fueling equipment at the world's busiest airport at the time, which was Midway.
Midway was. That's
interesting. Yeah, Midway. So that was 1957. We moved in the summer. My birthday is in October, so I turned 8 then. We lived about...
What day in October?
October 5th.
Mine's the 2nd.
Oh, very good. Both the children of New Year's Eve, I think, is the way that's understood.
That's probably right. So you then, as long as you were with your parents, you lived in Chicago then? So
We lived there for 5 years.
5 years.
Yeah, my father was then transferred. He worked for Phillips Petroleum Company.
Uh-huh.
Um, was transferred to Indianapolis, where we lived for about a year and a half.
Yeah.
Then he was transferred to Belleville, Illinois,
Mm-hmm.
just across the river from St. Louis.
Yeah.
Stayed there about 9 months. And then we moved to southeast New Mexico, and I spent my high school years in Hobbs, Hobbs,
Yeah.
just maybe half a dozen miles from the Texas border in southeast New Mexico.
Yeah.
So it was something of a nomad in
Yeah.
my childhood.
A lot of mobility. But
Yeah,
uh, I often, as a former educator, I think students that had that kind of mobility, they learned a lot. They learned to adjust,
yeah, that's very true.
constantly having to new friendship or build friendships, new friendships,
Yeah,
that kind of thing. So, well,
and I'm an
great.
only child, so
Uh,
it
all
was
right.
a sort of an extra challenge
Yeah.
in that case.
So you're the only child.
I am.
Yeah. So, Craig, as you were growing up, what were the major influences in your life that shaped who you believe you have become today? What are some of the values that you took, and who played roles in that? Teachers, coaches, parents, grandparents?
Yeah, well, I think um, my parents were by far the greatest influence on me, which is, of
Mm-hmm.
course, to be expected.
Mm-hmm.
My mother, in particular,
Mm-hmm.
my parents were quite different from each other.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, uh, nobody, I think, would have guessed that the two of them would have married had they known them separately. Um, my father was very much a child of rural America,
Mm-hmm.
but I suspect that he and probably I are someplace on the autism spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he was a very quiet man, spoke seldom, was had a volatile temper, and so when he did speak, it was often angrily, um, but generally he just sort of was quiet.
Mm-hmm.
My mother, on the other hand, was extremely outgoing, extremely talkative, very funny, and with a very vivid imagination.
Yeah.
Um, and she sort of took charge of raising me. And
Mm-hmm.
my dad sort of stood there in the background, you know, as sort of a quiet threat in case I crossed crossed the line in some way.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, at the same time, I felt loved by both of them.
Mm-hmm.
I never doubted my father's love for me. It's just that I was a little afraid of him, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but my mother uh, took child rearing very seriously. She was easily distracted, so I think there's that element of my upbringing. But for example, when I was born, I had some kind of disorder and almost died. Uh, and my mother's very vivid and almost certainly inaccurate description of my first days of life were that I wouldn't breathe, and the nurses had to pass me from one to the other and spank me so I would cry in order to breathe. Now that,
Wow.
of course, is not true. That
Yeah.
didn't happen, but
Mm-hmm.
something vaguely similar to that
Mm-hmm.
probably did. And during those days, she made a promise to God. She was not a particularly religious person. My parents didn't go to church when I was a kid, but she promised God that if I lived, that she would raise me to serve God.
Huh.
And so that means that the whole time I was growing up, they made sure I was dropped off at church. They didn't go, but they would drop me off. And my mother would always make sure that I read my Bible and said my prayers at night. So that was a very significant factor in my upbringing.
Yeah. How did you feel about church being dropped off? What was your?
I was okay with it. I
You're
mean,
okay.
that's pretty much it. I remember I didn't attend as often in Oklahoma,
Hmm.
but once we moved to Chicago and lived in the suburbs, south suburbs,
Hmm.
um, my my parents were careful to drop me off at a Nazarene church. It was my first exposure to the Church of the Nazarene. And they only did that because the church building resembled the Baptist church that they sometimes took me to when I was in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And my mother said, Nazarenes are good people. And so they dropped me off there. I mean, I don't know if surely they went a time or two to get me sort of situated, but my memory is that on a Sunday morning, my father would drive me to that church and let me out of the car, and I would walk in through the door.
Mhm.
And then he would pick me up when it was time for me to go home.
That's amazing.
And I don't remember being especially cared for at that church.
Hmm.
I remember loving the Bible stories and all of that sort of thing. But I don't remember a single person from those years who cared for me.
That's
So whatever
interesting.
that's worth.
Yeah, that's interesting. Uh, Craig and I come from a same, to our audience, same religious tradition. The Church of the Nazarene was a big influence on both of us. I had a somewhat similar experience. When my parents moved from Kansas City, where I grew up, to Seattle, where I graduated from high school, the pastor of the Kansas City church, who are people I visited last week in Oklahoma,
Good.
said to my father, listen, he's an athlete here. He's got 2 more years of high school. He can live with us. And my dad said, no, nobody's ever going to separate this family. I promise you that I will see that he goes to a Nazarene church, because my parents were not Nazarenes and they were not
Yeah.
really church people at that time. And I remember driving from Kansas City to Seattle, and we stopped in Pendleton, Oregon, and he woke me up on a Sunday morning, and he said, get up, you're going to church. And they were just traveling through, and he took me to a Nazarene church.
Interesting.
And then when I got to Seattle, he was very sure that I attended that Nazarene church. And
Yeah, it's funny how that goes.
yeah, it is. So from you graduated from high school, you went to Olivet Nazarene, right?
No, I went
No,
to actually went to what's now Southern Nazarene.
Southern. Oh, okay. Yeah.
So we were living in New Mexico at the time,
Oh, that's right. Okay.
and in my high school years, it was the first time I really became involved consciously in church activity in life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'd attended, but it wasn't until high school that I became really committed to the life of the church. And that's also very typical. But the pastor actually had 4 kids, 3 of whom were about my age, just had one after the other.
Yeah.
Um, and I became very close friends with them.
Mm-hmm.
And the pastor talked me into going to the nearest Nazarene college, which was called Bethany Nazarene College at the time.
Yeah.
And it still was like 500 miles away, but it was, and Bethany, Oklahoma is in the Oklahoma City area. So that was also a draw, a chance for me to go home.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to Bethany.
It's funny, Craig. Interesting parallel. I thought Bethany Nazarene or Southern Nazarene University or Bethany Nazarene College, wasn't it at one
Yeah,
point?
it was.
Yeah. was the only Nazarene college. And then when I got to Seattle, discovered Northwest Nazarene College.
Yeah.
But I played football, and my pastor worked with the pastor at Bethany First Church to try to get me a scholarship to Bethany Nazarene College. And I was offered a basketball scholarship.
Yeah.
Well, I never played basketball. I played football. I'm out shooting hoops in my backyard, and my dad said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I've been offered a basketball scholarship,
That's hilarious.
and I've got to figure out how to get this." And my dad convinced me. He says, "Son, you're a football player. You're not a basketball player." And so I then sent out a letter. I didn't know other Nazarene colleges existed, and I sent
Yeah.
out a letter to all the Nazarene colleges. My pastor in Renton, Washington, found those addresses for me, and I said the first Nazarene college to give me $600 as a scholarship, that's the one I'm going to. And Eastern Nazarene College is the one that
Oh,
responded.
far out. I had no idea.
And that's why I went to Eastern.
Hilarious.
Never been to Boston, had never heard of it, but that's why I went to
Oh,
Eastern
that's
Nazarene College.
hilarious. Yeah.
So, so you, at what point did you have a call to ministry?
Well, that was a long and kind of convoluted process.
Uh-huh.
Uh, I was I was a very rowdy undergraduate. Uh, in fact, my father later described me as a bird out of a cage, and I really did tear stuff up.
Hmm.
Had quite a reputation on campus for being, well, let me put it this way. When I went to the Nazarene Seminary, NTS,
Yeah.
I bumped into someone who knew me at Bethany in the bookstore, and he said, "What are you doing here?" And somebody else, years later, who had known me as an undergraduate, we were talking to somebody else, and he turned to the other person and he said, "Craig was extremely wild." And I think that's very true. I was actually a biology major at first. I never studied, so I had thought I would, go into some sort of medical profession, but my grades were horrendous because I was never studying, seldom went to class. The summer after my freshman year, I had a pretty dramatic, I guess the sort of the typical way of describing this was a conversion experience, which actually had a lot to do with my observations of America's involvement in the Vietnam War, at least the sort of ramifications of this moment involve that. And let me talk a minute about this because it's a big deal to me still.
Yeah.
I decided that it was time for me to get serious about my life once more, and I, prayed, gave my life to God, decided I would do whatever. And I had a job that summer in a little tiny town south of Hobbs in Texas with the name Goldsmith. And a friend of mine and I roomed together in another small town, but much larger than Goldsmith, in the area, Kermit, Texas, like the frog.
Yeah.
And every night, he, Arvis Wells is his name, and I, after work, before we went to bed, would study the book of Acts. We decided that we needed to study something in the Bible together. We thought about a gospel, but that's about Jesus, and Jesus was God. I'm not sure that's really relevant to our lives. So let's study something about people. So we studied the book of Acts, and it was a very naive, but a very intense study. We would read a sentence and then stop and talk about what it might mean. And of course, at that time, the war in Vietnam was everywhere. You couldn't turn your head without seeing something about the war. It was in the news, on the newspapers, headlines and magazines and whatever. Everyone was talking about it. So inevitably, I found myself asking myself if I, newly committed to the gospel, could ever put myself in a situation where I would set out to kill someone.
Hmm.
And the answer I reached was no.
Hmm.
I couldn't go to Vietnam. I couldn't engage in any aggressive activity that was likely to kill someone. And that summer, I became a pacifist. And I consider that my first theological act.
Mm-hmm.
And everything I have done since then has been filtered through that moment of realization.
Yeah.
And so my entire theology is kind of an extrapolation of what it signifies not to kill.
Yeah. That's powerful, Craig. We shared that as well. I was a conscientious objector, and I actually came to that realization in my senior year in high school, and it was in large measure because of my faith
Yeah.
that I could not see myself engaged in that kind of activity, particularly as an instrument of the state.
Yeah.
And my father, who was a World War II veteran, and my brother served in Vietnam, when I
Yeah.
called to inform them that I had filed papers to be a conscientious objector, I thought it would be the last conversation I would have with my father. And it was just the opposite. He said on the phone, he said, "You goddamn right, son. I'm not sending another son to fight in Vietnam. You want to go to Canada?" And I
Yeah.
said, "No, this is my country. I'm prepared to accept whatever consequences go with that." And
Yeah, that's wonderful.
yeah, it was just that decision, as you continued to influence all kinds of other decisions I would eventually make in working in social justice kinds of issues. Uh, Theologically, I mean, you taught at Trevecca
Yes.
Nazarene, Olivet Nazarene as well,
Yes.
and then you finished at Azusa Pacific, correct?
That's right. And actually, I started out, I taught for 2 years at Point Loma
Oh, you did. Okay.
right after I finished my coursework at
Mm.
Claremont.
Yeah. So, who are the influences, major intellectual influences of you? I remember you as a student of Kierkegaard. I don't know if
Oh, that's,
was that the heart of your theological influence?
well, I think so. I think Kierkegaard was my first love, and I think I've spent probably more time with his texts than anybody else. I mean, my dissertation isn't on him,
Mm-hmm.
but I think he's been the most profound influence on me. And I sort of fell into reading him because one of my professors, a philosophy professor at Bethany, uh, had been doing some research on him, and I Rob Staples was my theology professor at Bethany,
Mm-hmm.
and he had appreciation for Kierkegaard, so I was able to, do some research papers for his classes on him. Phineas Bresee, who's often considered the founder of the Church of the Nazarene,
Mm-hmm.
is remembered to have said that the calling, I think it was Bresee who said this, the calling of the Church of the Nazarene is to Christianize Christianity.
Mm.
If it wasn't him, it was somebody in the tradition. So I'm pretty sure it's him. But Kierkegaard very similarly maintained that his task was to make clear what it is to be a Christian in Christendom.
Mm.
He believed that nobody any longer, at least very few people any longer, remembered what it was to be a Christian, since being a Christian was automatic.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and Kierkegaard dovetailed very well with my my pacifism,
Mm.
because he is a thinker, although not himself a pacifist, but he's a thinker who is profoundly concerned with what it means to abandon your life utterly to God in Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody is better at sort of working their way into your deep motivations and your self-deceptions and your divided will and all of that, and to make clear what in fact is called for if you're to take this stuff seriously.
So we're talking with Craig Keene, who's a retired professor of systematic theology and taught at a variety of colleges and universities. Craig, let me ask you this. How has Kierkegaard's influence on your life helped you to navigate? And behind this question is an assumption here, which is something, again, you and I both have shared, our struggle with the Church of the Nazarene.
Yeah.
And how has Kierkegaard helped influence or shape how you respond to a Church of the Nazarene as it has evolved?
Yeah, he's had a really very massive impact on me in that respect in particular. And in part because he has made clear that there is no way to um, to communicate the gospel directly. And there is no behavior which which as such demonstrates the faith of the one engaged in that behavior. That no ideas, no logic, no you can see why I'm a non-linear systematic theologian. No, no matter how strong you are at your no matter what skills you have as a persuader or as a logician, you can never lay out an indisputable case for the superiority of Christianity and Christian faith. And in fact, life is to be lived in the difficult position of giving yourself to something that you can never put into words adequately, that you could never demonstrate, even by your mode of life, is the true way to live. And so that meant for me that the ambiguity of being a part of a people that didn't match the way I looked at the world was okay. That I could live with these people and for these people. I could work alongside them, could point to the Jesus that they pointed to, could bear witness to the importance of an absolute commitment to the gospel, and do so without having to agree with the rather restrictive understanding of the holy life that is characteristic of these people. But I should also say I didn't live a duplicitous life so that I would just sort of pretend to live as they lived. I mean, when I went to Trevecca Nazarene University to teach, the president, Homer Adams, sat me down in my first interview before I was hired, and he started talking about what he was expecting of the faculty. And understand, my mother made it through the Great Depression by going to movies. I mean, she found hope and life and excitement from the movies. And my mother, the greatest influence on my life, had taught me to love movies. And I still love movies. I mean, there's Cool Hand Luke back behind me.
I was going to say.
And so I went to Trevecca, and the president said, I think the faculty here need to be, true to the Church of the Nazarene. For example, I don't think the faculty should go to movies. And I sat there and I thought, what have I gotten into?
Yeah.
And they offered me a job, and I took it. And I taught there for 13 years. And because of what he said to me, I stopped going to movies.
That's amazing.
It
Wow.
was amazing. Now, they eventually showed movies on campus,
Yeah.
and I would go to those. I would watch movies on television. I eventually got a VCR so I could rent movies. And since they were showing movies on campus, I also went to movies at Vanderbilt University. But I did not go to commercial movie theaters. And that's simply because that's what these people were.
Yeah.
And my friends and colleagues went to movies, so it wasn't like I thought I couldn't get away with it or something. But I just thought, if I'm going to be here serving these people, he has said to me, looking me in the eye, what he expected, and I'm just going to do it. And I don't consider that to be a great sign of character or something,
Right.
but it does illustrate, I think, the importance of living with a people and working with them. So whatever that's worth.
Well, you use the word in terms of the ambiguity. How did from your perspective and in the course of your journey and who you have become and were becoming, how did the institution respond to your ambiguity?
Okay, well, that's a very good question. Generally, quite positively. I left. I taught at 3 Nazarene universities. I left each one, but not because I felt they wanted me to leave. In fact, in each case, it was clearly communicated to me that they didn't want me to go. And so, so I don't know if they saw something in my eyes that, I really did care about them, or if they understood that, I don't know. It's hard to, and it's not like I didn't have a reputation for kind of stirring up questions in my students. It's not like there was no bad press out there on the district or something, but there wasn't much. On the other hand, each time I left one of those universities, the administration, usually this was spearheaded by the president. I think in each case it was. The administration had undertaken a program of sort of straightening out the religion department.
No.
I didn't leave for that reason in particular, even though I don't know. Maybe that's not entirely true. It became painful, to be at Trevecca. It became painful to be at Olivet, and not just for me, but painful for Alicia, my wife, who's the other great influence in my life. I should talk about her eventually.
Yeah.
But it became painful for us. And so much so that when word got out that I was unhappy, I got offers from other Nazarene schools. And yeah, so I don't know. And perhaps if I'd stayed at those schools, they would have eventually put pressure on me to leave or something. I don't know. But I would say all but a couple of years of teaching in Nazarene universities were just wonderful.
In the context of this ambiguity and with Kierkegaard's influence, either in Kierkegaard or yourself, as you've worked in these various institutions, is there a line that you won't cross? That given the closed nature, particularly of the Church of the Nazarene historically, whether it was movies or dancing, or today its alliance very closely with the religious right and
Oh,
the
yeah.
political right.
Yeah.
Is there a line where Kierkegaard or his influence on you that you would not cross?
That's a very good question. Um, and I frankly don't know how to answer the question.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I do think that the task of anyone out to communicate the gospel, to proclaim the gospel, is to do so indirectly. Um, it is not so much to sort of say, this right here, that's wrong.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, it's not to say that there's no moment when that kind of declaration is not to occur. I think that moment does need to come from time to time. And I have done my best to state that as clearly as I could, time and time again on certain issues. But on the other hand, I've always wanted to do that in the midst of conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And it has only been when I've found no conversation occurring, when no one wants to talk about these issues, when they just want to declare, this is what you must do, shut up and conform,
Mm-hmm.
that I have been loud in my denunciation.
Yeah.
And of course, the loudness and the directness of that kind of denunciation depends also on what situation you're in.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're alongside of people who are, say, homophobic, who are heteronormative, if you're alongside of them, working with them, the question is, how might we move forward towards something more loving that embraces God's children much more sort of, I don't know, faithfully or something?
Mm-hmm.
And that may not be by just, sort of shouting somebody down.
Right.
But in recent years, I would say in the last couple of decades, I found myself increasingly sidelined by the Church of the Nazarene,
Mm-hmm.
not invited to their events, not contacted to be asked, as I once was when I didn't know anything, what I thought about something. At that point, it has seemed unhelpful to speak as indirectly as I would ordinarily do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've much more loudly declared such things as the church. I mean, to quote uh, Ken Grider, a theologian, a very conservative theologian of the Church of the Nazarene, just as the Wesleyan holiness tradition embraced the ordination of women and women in ministry, just as the Wesleyan holiness tradition was involved significantly in the abolition movement, fought slavery tooth and nail. He said, now is the time for the Church of the Nazarene to fight homophobia and to embrace queer people the way the church embraced women and African slaves in this country.
Yeah. Well said. Well put.
So I've wanted to say that as directly as possible. Had I still been teaching in the Church of the Nazarene, I might or might not have screamed that as loudly, depending on how much I can engage people in conversations. And a friend of ours who's extremely good at this continual conversation with people without shouting them down is Ron Benefield.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he's a wonderful illustration of how you can hold certain views and work alongside of people who strongly disagree with you. I mean, he was a lifelong Democrat, is still,
Mm-hmm.
and he works with people who are right-wing Republicans.
Right.
and he can work with them well and gets along very well with them. So, I mean, he's a good example. Perhaps I could have pulled that off.
Yeah.
But, when you're sort of out in the wilderness, all you can do is sort of cry loudly,
Right.
hoping the echo will make its way to the city.
Right. Yeah, Ron is a good example of trying to do that. I mean, I've always used the concept of, and I think it was somewhat influenced by Kierkegaard, is to live incarnate in a
Yeah.
world that's broken. And uh, I have to tell you, I was recently invited to the White House to facilitate a major event, and my theology says, "Go, be present, proclaim." But that was my line. I could not do that. In this administration, there was no way in hell I was going to be
Yeah.
able to look at myself in the mirror and enable in any way, shape, or form what this administration stands for. It was
Yeah,
an
I
awkward
agree.
decision. So tell me about your wife and as
Yeah,
an influence.
yeah, Alicia, and it's Elesha, so it's a tough spelling.
Yeah.
Alicia was born and raised in Marshall, Texas,
Mhm.
East Texas, in a region of the American South that was particularly virulently racist,
Mm.
white supremacist. She grew up among people of that stripe. Her father was a deputy sheriff.
Wow.
The most, I shouldn't, I should be careful about how I speak about, but he was, in fact, the most overtly racist person I remember ever meeting.
Mm.
And partly because of the time. I mean, he felt he was fighting something, and here was this long-haired hippie freak marrying his daughter. So I think he wanted to make clear where he stood to me. But she grew up in this world. Her father was not a Christian, did not attend church, and was very proud of it. He liked to say to me, "If you were arrested for being a Christian, could you be convicted?" Uh, but her mother was a second generation Nazarene.
Mm.
So Alicia was a third generation Nazarene. Her grandmother was the matriarch of their local Nazarene church, a very Victorian woman, the wife of a justice of the peace in Marshall, and was in charge of the office where her husband served, and was a very um, a woman who liked to be in charge. And so there was her father, this very strong, good-looking deputy sheriff, secular man, and her grandmother, who was uh, a caricature of a Victorian Nazarene.
Wow.
And Alicia grew up in that environment and was herself very independently minded. So, for example, when we first met, although not because of my Nazarene background, but because of uh, my awkwardness, I couldn't dance. But she was the most amazing dancer I've ever seen. And she'd try to teach me to dance, and she'd show me the moves, and I would just stop her and say, "Do that again." It's so amazing. So she was very independently minded.
Yeah.
She was not interested in conforming to anybody's idea of what she should be.
Mm.
She wore micro mini skirts, uh, and was quite what ogled maybe by the male undergraduates of that time. And so we married, we fell in love and married, and that's a complicated story, which I will not tell because it would take way too long. Um, but we married, and I found myself in love with, and going into life with someone who was as physical as I was intellectual.
Wow.
So I've always sort of lived in my head, but she's always lived in her body. And I mean, just unbelievably well. And was very conscious of her body. And so all of that led me to think more and more seriously about what embodiment signifies.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember, and this is a weird question for a professor to be asked, but I was asked it more than once. Um, I was asked, have you influenced your wife's thinking? Something like that. You influenced her theology, the way she looks at God. And I said, I don't, I don't know, but I can tell you for sure she's influenced my theology.
Hmm.
And that's really true.
Yeah.
And I do believe that one of the reasons why I've found myself to be stressing the importance of embodiment is that she has been my wife now for 56 years.
That's a
So,
great story. That's powerful. We're talking to Craig King, retired systematic professor of systematic theology professor, and a longtime friend and colleague whose life I've watched and has influenced me in many different ways. Craig, let me ask you this question.
you me, Jim.
Well,
You me.
oh, you're kind.
Seriously.
So, uh, what's the legacy you want to leave? You've had a long career. I see you on Facebook. I see your students respond to you and have such great respect for you. But when you stop and think at this point in your life, I mean, it's interesting. Stephen Covey wrote the book Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, and the second habit is living with the end in mind, where he imagines you attending your own funeral today. What would people say? And if you had the chance, and people were you were able to influence it 10 years from now, imagine what people could say. What would you want to do? What do you want people to say about the legacy you've left? And it may be you don't really care what they have to say, but what is it you want them to know?
Another great and very difficult question.
Mm-hmm.
My last sabbatical at APU, Azusa Pacific University, I took in part because I had open heart surgery.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I was admitted to the hospital the day after that first day of class when you go over the syllabus,
Yeah.
like the worst day of the semester. It's the only class session I had that semester. And so I was admitted to the hospital and had open heart surgery and took that semester off and then took a sabbatical the next semester. And when I came back, I was asked to have a meeting with students and faculty to give a report on what happened during my sabbatical, what I did during my sabbatical. And one of the things I said was, it occurred to me during those months when I realized how easily I could have died, it occurred to me how well the world would get along without me.
Mm.
And perhaps that's what I would want people to remember, that we are to live our lives recognizing that we are unnecessary, that our lives don't have to be extremely efficient. In fact, they never will be. we don't have to accomplish anything. In fact, in the great scheme of things, we won't accomplish anything except what is quite negligible. And so that means that we are here and we can give ourselves away. We don't have to accumulate anything, achieve anything, get any honors or prestige or privilege. We can just give ourselves away to others. And if nothing's left over for anyone to remember and comment on, then that's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
So I mean, something like that.
Well, it was well said. Last question. And I ask this in every one of them. It will appear somewhat trivial, but I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Leap Year.
Oh, I have. Yes.
Yeah. Remember the question that the suitor is asking Amy Adams, the character, that if your house were to catch on fire, what's the one thing you would grab? Not people, not pets, not your computer, but what's the one thing in your life that's so important that you have? I mean, I'll illustrate it. My father gave me, from the Second World War, he had this medical kit. It's a black box, and I have put everything in that black box that symbolizes or are important to me, from a string of hair from a girlfriend in high school to a library card to Harvard University, to you name it. Those little things that I look back on and that I value. What's one thing you would grab?
I have no idea. That's a crazy thing. One thing I might grab, and this is interesting to me. On my 4th birthday, and again, keep in mind, I'm an only child.
Yeah.
We moved around a lot. When I went to high school, it was my 9th school. I think I might grab the doll that was given to me on my 4th birthday.
Yeah.
It is a Zippy doll. I don't know if you remember those or not. Zippy was a chimpanzee on some television thing. I don't remember what. But I loved Zippy, and so my folks bought me a Zippy doll and gave it to me. And I slept with that thing, kept it with me for way longer than a male child should keep a doll. And I might grab that. And I wonder what that means.
Well, we'll let our listeners try to figure that one out.
Yeah, good.
Craig, thanks so much. This has really been a treat, and we should have had more of these conversations over our careers.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed this very much, and I appreciate you.
Appreciate it. We've been talking with Craig Keene, and you've been listening to the Legacy Project. Remember, your legacy is important to you, and it also helps shape the legacy you want to create, and they're very much connected. So thank you for being a part of the Legacy Project. To find out more information about this conversation and other Legacy podcast episodes, go to servantforge.org. Please subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app and consider leaving us a review. The podcast was produced by Matt Erickson, music by David Hyde. Please look for a new episode on our podcast coming out soon. Remember, you have inherited a great legacy. You have an opportunity to create a great legacy. Engage your past to build your future.